Welcome to the Q Podcast.
Q is about conversation.
If we're really concerned about ending poverty, we've got to be more concerned about creating justice.
Our cultural products as Christians need to both defy and resonate with the culture.
And God's doing amazing things. His church is expanding, his church is growing.
It's not what's the purpose of my life, it's what is the purpose that's been assigned.
Stay curious, think well, advance good. This is Q.
This is Gabe Lyons. Welcome to another edition of the Q Ideas podcast, and excited today to talk about politics. Of course, it's election day this week. So many people in their local elections, or maybe your particular state was voting for statewide offices, but it's always a week where we want to think well about something that's become so divisive in American life. We've become so entrenched in our points of view, how we think about politics, how it's framed up for us from major media. And sometimes it's just helpful to step outside of that. And we're going to talk about that today with our guest, Jeff Pickering from the AEI, American Enterprise Institute. But before we do that, I want to tell you about something really cool going on in the next week that all of our listeners, I want you to just pause for a moment, plan to do this on your calendar. But in a week, we're offering a 2-hour free event. It's called the Next Gen Summit. And the Next Gen Summit is an event that we hosted several weeks back where we brought together 200 of really the most influential young content creators, entrepreneurs, athletes, business leaders, people in the social sector creating nonprofits, pastors, but it was this younger group of leaders that we wanted to pour into over the course of 3 days. And we invited in speakers, people like Andy Crouch and Jenny Allen and Jonathan Pokluda and John Mark Comer, and Rebecca was there and so many others to pour into this particular group of leaders of a new generation, ages 16 to 30 years old, and to help them orient themselves to the wild ride of public life, of the tensions that come up with so many of these complex issues. And what does it mean to be biblically faithful? I mean, this is such a core issue for us here at Q Ideas, is how do we navigate faithfully our cultural environment? And how do we not back away from the tough issues, but we actually walk towards them because we believe we can bring truth to them, we can bring light to them, we can bring freedom to people who understand these. And so over these 3 days, that's what we did. So what we decided to do, though, is we decided as a team, with the help of our donors and people who just support this work, is we want to make this available for free, a 2-hour version of that event where we've synthesized myself and Grant Skelton, who's the director of our Next Gen initiatives, come together and we host this evening for 2 hours on November the 10th at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. And if you will go to qideas.org/nextgen and RSVP, you will see there how we're going to bring together these presenters. You're going to get to hear kind of the best of from these 2 days that we were together. And we're going to serve it up for you, but not only for you, but for people who are young. So if you have a college ministry, if you're in a church and you've got a group of people that come together regularly to talk about these types of issues, this is the perfect couple of hours of content for them to sit together, to watch, to discuss, to learn. You're going to hear on topics, everything from conviction to the topic of sexuality, to technology, to progressive Christianity with John Mark Comer, helping people understand why we hold on to truth no matter where people are telling us progress is going. So many of these difficult issues that are hard for people to come around and have conversations around, we raise those issues like we always do at Q Ideas, and we try to settle in helping this generation grow their confidence and how to navigate faith for this moment. And so again, you can go to qideas.org/nextgen. You can register for free. Share that link, please. Share it large and wide. Share it on social media. Share it with your friends, your community, with families who have kids who are teenagers. It's the perfect conversation starter. And then once you register for that, we're going to give that access to you over several weeks so that even over the holiday weekend of Thanksgiving, if you have family in town and you're like, hey, I want to be intentional about some of these conversations, this is a perfect tool and resource for you to be able to enjoy that. Now, as we head into this next conversation, it's going to be about the next generation, but very focused on how are they thinking about politics, and how can us working hard to share the stories that allow people to imagine maybe a different way of approaching politics, how can that inspire them and how can it help them? And so we're going to be talking with Jeff Pickering from AEI, and we're talking about a film that we have as part of our Q Media platform called For the Love of Neighbor, Politics for the Common Good. Let's listen in now. Jeff, welcome to the Q Ideas podcast.
Hey, Gabe, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we are excited to talk more about all that you're seeing and experiencing as we think about the next generation and we think about the world of politics. How do we think well about this? Obviously, for anybody paying attention, we've seen that become one of the most divisive spaces, not just for the world, but we've seen it particularly in Christian context now, where there's a lot of vitriol amongst even good, faithful Christians who have very different views on policy, on candidates, on how to think well about that. And AEI and your work has been all about helping people become just more informed and imaginative about what it might look like for us to think about advancing the common good. So for those who aren't aware of some of your work, maybe just give us some context as to the space that you're in and the goals of this project.
Certainly. Well, so we're talking here, this project was a documentary film that our team here at AEI's Initiative on Faith and Public Life produced recently within the last couple of years. The film's called For Love of a Neighbor, Politics for the Common Good. And it traces stories of particularly three individuals that are involved in politics and public life at the local level, at the national level, and at the community level as well. But this documentary came out of more than a decade of work here at AEI's Initiative on Faith and Public Life, which at its core, our organization within the institution of AEI here is an outreach arm to Christian college students. So we're an outreach program, produce events, we produce content, all with the aim of connecting with Christian college students, helping them and equipping them to think deeply about faithful participation in contemporary American public life, and to connect them with the scholarship of our think tank, so the American Enterprise Institute here in Washington, D.C., which is a public policy research organization that's been around for nearly a century. So that's a bit about our work, and this documentary came out of a decade of connecting with Christian college students.
It's a wonderful piece. I know we featured it at Q Ideas and also on Q Media for a season because it tells these stories, as you mentioned. And one of the people it follows is Justin Giboney, who created the AND campaign. He's been someone we've interviewed many times and has given talks at our Q conference events because he has been someone that's just fighting for people to understand there's a both and here. Like, we don't just get to pick sides. We have to work through the depth and the complexities of difficult issues. And as you mentioned, so much of your focus is the next generation. You're on college campuses all the time. Some of our listeners are college students, but many have kids who are college students,
right,
or they're very aware of like this college environment today and how it's becoming difficult for people to share their points of view. I think one of the latest studies I saw in the last few months was showing that somewhere near the high 50%, almost 60% of conservative college students don't speak out. They don't share their views because for fear of retribution, for fear of their point of views not going to fit in. And so many of these college spaces aren't becoming a space where there's a lot of free thinking allowed. There's almost a control happening to where if you don't have a certain point of view, you're not able to speak. And so you drop a documentary into this space where you're starting to tell some different stories. You're starting to help people see, like, look, we can all talk about these things. We don't have to censor ourselves or be in spaces that are censored. And I'm curious, how's that going? Like, what's the response from students who, see a film like this or are just given space to talk through the complexities?
Right. No, you're exactly right, and I would distill the problem that you're touching at there as just a growing illiberalism on campuses, and really more so than just campuses. But I think like so much in American life, what starts on the campus doesn't end on the campus, and we're seeing that kind of illiberalism in so many different corners, and it's not just the illiberalism of one side of the political aisle. There's a true illiberalism happening on the left and on the right when you talk about politics and these kinds of issues.
Can you define illiberalism for people who aren't familiar with that term?
Sure. So I think it's actually best defined for people who wouldn't be familiar with the term with that data that you just highlighted, of this feeling of don't want to say the wrong thing, even though I don't even know what the right or wrong thing is here on this political issue, for fear of being attacked, being marginalized as a result. And so another word is this sort of growing rigid tribalism of you're either in or you're out of this group, losing yourself in this group. So liberalism and illiberalism are political science nerd terms that we would talk about at a place like AEI here in Washington, D.C. But I think just that experience of, so classical liberalism would be living in a pluralistic society where we can disagree without dehumanizing one another. And illiberalism is what we're seeing where you have that sort of knee-jerk emotion to say, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to be out of step with my tribe or even my context, right? So a conservative student at a very progressive at a very progressive university would often feel that sort of bearing down on them. I think for us, what I would say I'm encouraged by is the kinds of students that are attracted to our programs are students that are looking for a refuge from all of that and to be challenged. And we have students. I mean, AEI attracts students to our summer programming. Here, we have a couple hundred students coming through the building for a variety of week-long seminars with our scholars and other professors in our network to talk about these big policy and cultural issues. And we have students really from all sorts of political persuasions, conservatives, progressives, moderates. And what's really exciting for us is to be able to have this space where students are respected, and the discourse is at a higher level, where instead of just teaching people talking points of how to say that their fellow student is wrong or immoral or evil, they can have conversations and discuss things. And I think this is really important because when I think of who I needed when I was younger, when I was a college student, I didn't know what I didn't know yet. And I had some political ideas and some opinions and might even have called them convictions at the time. But it's the people who can come alongside you and help you think well and think critically about issues and help you learn what you didn't know. So for us in our corner of this conversation, it's been going really well. I think the documentary has really helped that because it gives students a look into people like Justin who are doing this well and with integrity. And that's the last thing I'll say is I think there are, when it comes to our students and what I've seen in this rising generation, I've seen a real desire for integrity. And I use that not just integrity of the idea of standing for moral principles, although that's really important to be people of truth, especially right now for Christians. But I use integrity in the sense of a desire for your life to be whole and undivided, that you're not a hypocrite and you're not just using politics as a means to an end. And there's that real desire for integrity in this generation, and I hope that the people that we are platforming for them to learn from and to learn alongside are people of integrity, because that's what they desire.
Right. Well, as you mentioned, I mean, the college campus is this perfect place to demonstrate and to illustrate a public square that is pluralistic, right? It should be, at least, where people come from very different backgrounds, different religious beliefs, maybe no belief at all, and they're given the space to talk about ideas and to try to understand what is true, what is not true, philosophy, all of the great subjects that are so important to form a new generation. In that space, from your perspective, I mean, how should a Christian who's in that space, somebody who wants to find what is actually true, but we're in a culture that views truth as very arbitrary. It's whatever you think it is, and your truth is not my truth. And we hear those phrases so commonly now that we almost roll our eyes, or maybe we just start to believe maybe that's true. But I think in your pursuit and what we're trying to do here is find what is actually true. Mm-hmm. So how do we try to advocate for truth in this context that doesn't necessarily regard there being a single way of seeing issues or or foundational moral arguments?
Well, I think for me, speaking as a Christian, it really is a matter of being back to the basics, being somebody who, if I want to be of truth, I have to go where truth is found, which for me is in the Word of God, in the Scriptures. I think about Philippians 4. Whatever is true, whatever is good, whatever is noble, whatever is commendable and excellent. Think about these things, and so for me, it starts with being somebody who's grounded in the truth of God's word, and grounded in a local body of believers by being a member of a local church. That's where I think it has to start for Christians engaged in this culture where we are not going to agree on everything. But I think if we can be grounded in the truth of who God says we are, that we are actually we are made in His image. We are both more sinful than we would like to think of ourselves, and yet we are infinitely more loved in Christ than we could ever even imagine or put a word to. I think that's for Christians where it starts to be grounded in that sense, so that you can go out into the public square and have all sorts of conversations with people that you might disagree with on any number of issues. But if you start from God's truth and see your neighbor as somebody made in His image and worth immeasurable dignity and value, I think that will go a long way for people to feel respected and to feel seen, so that even when we disagree, we're not dehumanizing the other person, and we're coming alongside them as their neighbor.
I know that is such a good distinction to just come back to as foundational as just viewing other people in the image of God. Another term you use a lot in the documentary, and we love this documentary. Like I said, it's they can view it at qideas.org at our Q Media app or location, and people can get that actually for a free trial. So if you go to qideas.org/trial, and you're hearing this documentary and what we're talking about, and you're like, I'd really like to see it, that's where you can go see that at no cost. But you use the term public life a lot, and that's a term that some people aren't as familiar with, or they're trying to understand what is public life versus private life, and how do we think about that term as it relates to politics, and are there some areas that don't fall within politics, but they do fall within public life? Could you just tell us more about that concept?
Sure. So, in some ways, like all rhetoric, words matter because of what the imagery that it conjures up in our mind. So, if we were to bring forward an initiative on faith and politics, although I think politics is important, that people often sort of immediately get trapped in the sort of binary, whether it's the binary of Congress, congressional debates or arguments on Twitter. But we wanted to use the term public life because we want to equip Christians to think about all the different areas in which they're interacting with their neighbors and striving toward the common good. And so, so this is everything. This is everything from economics and business, society, culture, and yes, politics and public policy. But as an example of that, I mean, my team and I just got back as we're recording this from a weekend in Chicago where we were working primarily with business and economics students and MBA students thinking about entrepreneurship and faith. I mean, that's a part of public life. And our think tank here, AEI, was originated to make a case for the free enterprise system and to do scholarship and research that supported the benefits of the free enterprise system to a society. Well, that's bigger than politics and who's in elected office and the debates of Washington, D.C. And that's really important for us because we want to bring a distinctly Christian perspective for students to be equipped on a whole range of relevant topics that is bigger than just what each party is standing and yelling about at any given moment.
Right. We also know in the next generation we're dealing with even more mental health concerns and anxiety, depression about the nature of where the world's going. I think some of the most recent polling showing that for the first time, so many more Americans see us heading towards a future that's not good. There's a lot of despair, essentially. And when we have despair, I mean, as Christians, we're called to have hope. We're not allowed to like live in that way, even though it comes against us, it confronts us, it can overwhelm us. We have a different way that we have to see a future. And I see that playing out in this film, the way that you follow these characters. And there's a constant sense of just hope that's driving what they're doing, even if the circumstances around them are saying something different. What is that hope, and how did you see encouragement when you watch this, or when you see students watch this? How does it bring encouragement to them when they see characters trying to live that out against the challenges of despair that can otherwise overwhelm us?
Man, that is very true. Just the issue that that you laid out about and I'm actually really thankful for a greater recognition of mental health that this past year and a half has brought into conversations, and it's been something of my own struggle, and seeking healing through counseling, and I personally am grateful that we're talking about mental health more often in public life, and I think watching people like Justin or Sarah or Senator Tim Scott or many others that are featured in this film, professors, other journalists, other clergy. I think it's encouraging for students to see people who are doing this, who are doing this well, who are engaging in these issues, like I said, with integrity. I think it's encouraging because often students don't know the how because they haven't seen it done well, because so much of American institutional life, American public life, is fractured and is not healthy right now. And oftentimes if you're looking on social media or cable news or any of the sort of national overviews of the country, you're not seeing much health in institutional life because there's something about those platforms that attract the most unhealthy to get the most engaged and to want to be out there the most. And so the people that are healthy are the ones who are in many ways serving at the margins. And I think I hope that our film shows those people doing it well who might otherwise not be platformed in a way that others who who are not as healthy. So I think it's been encouraging to them in that sense, at least in the conversations that I've had with students and others who have seen the film. That's often a takeaway of, oh wow, I have a new way to think about engaging in issues of policy because I saw this story of a woman, Sarah in Bowdoin, who is serving in her local town board and in a city council. Maybe that's something that I ought to consider. So I think it gives students the how to pursue integrity in public life.
Well, and I think the good news about the last couple of years is there's been a real rise in awareness about how much local politics matters, how our towns and cities are governed, how that decision-making power plays out in the role of our lives because of the reaction by the government to COVID. So we've started to see how much local governments can create very different environments for people based on the state you live in, the city that you live in. And I do think more people are taking a look at it. And they're going, maybe I should volunteer. Maybe I should be more involved. There should be more civic engagement. And so I think the timing of this documentary, For the Love of Neighbor, Politics for the Common Good, comes at a perfect time for people to just go, okay, if I wanted to do that, like how would I do that? And how would I do that in a way that's contributing to the good of all my neighbors and is not going to continue the divisiveness. But one final question. A lot of our people listening and part of the Q community are involved in various aspects of life and careers and industry. And some of them are politics or professionally involved in government and working in that sphere, but many would not be. What would you hope their takeaway would be? Why should someone that's not involved in politics watch this documentary, consider watching it maybe with their kids or their friends and having a conversation around it? What are your hopes for them?
Well, that's a great question, and I think I would just say this: if anything that we've shared of this film is at all spiking some interest or sort of some curiosity, I would say my hope for this film, and again, I think it bears out with the people who have seen it and the way that conversations have gone after the film's come out, that it really is a breath of fresh air for people who are unsatisfied with the state of American public life right now. and maybe even especially for Christians who are unsatisfied with the state of Christian political engagement, Christian engagement in issues of public life. And in the documentary, we really start out by asking the question, why bother with all of this? Because there is such a deep exhaustion with the things of the public square. But I think when you hear from the people that we showcase in the film, these people who are truly serving at the margins, taking care of the vulnerable, and view public policy, public life, engagement in these issues as a real calling from the Lord to live out that greatest commandment of loving the Lord your God and loving your neighbor as yourself. I think you'll find it as a breath of fresh air, and it doesn't mean we have the perfect solution. I don't think anybody in our film would claim to have that. I mean, we are talking about imperfect solutions when we're talking about politics and the public square, but it really shows in this documentary how to put your faith to care for your neighbor as yourself into action. And so I think these stories, every time I watch the film, I'm reminded we can do this well. It is possible to be a Christian in the public square in America in 2021 or beyond, and do this well. And there are people in whose footsteps I view it as a real honor and privilege to follow behind them in the great work that they're doing.
Yeah, well, Jeff, thank you for the work that you guys are doing. And for everybody listening, remember you can watch For the Love of Neighbor, Politics for the Common Good on Q Media at qideas.org/trial. Get your free trial. If you're already subscribing, you can go in there and look at that under our film section. And you'll hear from some more voices, not only Justin, but other people who've been a part of our Q gatherings and conversations, such as Senator Ben Sass, Arthur Brooks from Harvard, David French, Greg Thompson, Russell Moore, Sherry Harder, Tim Scott. I mean, it's an incredible group of people who have already been contributing to so much of this type of work, but pulls it together. For those of you who are saying, I want to introduce my friends to thinking about the common good, to a whole different view of politics. Maybe you've seen them get really entranced with our current modern vision of politics, and you need to snap them out of it. This is a great way to do that and to create a new kind of conversation. So, Jeff, thank you for your work and for the work of AEI and for bringing this to our attention.
We so appreciate the partnership and that our film is available to your network and your audience. And I will have to say, I love the idea of this film being something that can snap people out of a current being entranced by the unhealthy state of politics as it is right now. I might have to start using that.
Hey, start using it. Let's do it. All right. Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for being with us.